Welcome, Age of Vintage Society. Lee Marvin rose through the ranks of movie stardom as a character actor, delivering mostly villainous supporting turns in many films before finally graduating to leading roles. Regardless of which side of the law he was on, however, he projected a tough-as-nails intensity and a two-fisted integrity which elevated even the slightest material. He was a drunk, on-screen and off, and starred in the most violent films of his age. But first and foremost, he was a fantastic actor. Why was Lee Marvin always in villain mode? Make sure to watch the video until the end and leave your thoughts in the comments. If you are new here, join our wonderful community by subscribing to the Age of Vintage channel. Lee Marvin was no softie. He was a man who held his own in war pictures, westerns and action-soaked media from the 1950s all the way to his death in 1987. From his spectacular performance as Chino in The Wild One to his television appearances in M Squad and finale in Menahem Golan's Delta Force, Lee Marvin worked it all out. Behind the scenes, stories on him are legendary. Raging drunk, womanizer, loyal veteran, consummate professional. The list goes on, each description contrary to the other. Lee Marvin is, it seems, a real urban legend. There is even rumoured to be a secret society dedicated to the actor called the Sons of Lee Marvin, which includes such upstanding individuals as musicians Tom Waits and Nick Cave, filmmaker Jim Jarmusch, and actors John Lurie and Richard Bowes. Why such a fuss over one man? He was a war veteran. After being kicked out of a variety of schools in his youth, he served as a scout sniper in the US Marines, but was shot in the buttocks area during World War II by Japanese fire, severing his sciatic nerve area. He was thus given an official medical discharge. Don't let this fool you, however. Most of his platoon lost their lives in that very same battle. Lee Marvin went forward into off-Broadway theatre almost directly following this, and then Hollywood soon after, focusing primarily in war films. Do what you know, right? However, Lee Marvin's importance to the film world goes beyond rumoured tales of his drunken set antics, causing a punch-out by a very frustrated Burt Lancaster, or stories of his kinesthetic working relationship with John Borman. He is quite literally the subject of male character actor worship for anyone who loves action cinema of the 1960s and 70s. While many fans may not have bothered with Edward Dmytryk's Raintree County, their experience with Marvin has been enough to solidify him as an icon of high-level masculine culture. His strong participation in our moving image heritage that has created masculine media has made him a central and much-beloved figure. The Marvin persona and identity knows no bounds. Although Lee Marvin is best known for his icy tough guy roles, such as his chilling titular villain in The Man Who Shot Liberty Valance, or the paternal yet brutally realistic platoon leader in The Big Red One, very little is known of his personal life, his family background, his experiences in World War II, and his ongoing battles with alcoholism, rage and depression, occasioned by his post-war PTSD. Now, my video provides a full understanding and appreciation of this acting titan's place in the Hollywood pantheon, in spite of his very real and human struggles. Lee Marvin was a colourful character who marched to the beat of his own drum. Coming from a line of noted historical figures, Lee would also distinguish himself as a war hero. But his brutal war experience brought his demons ever closer to the surface, leading him to seek oblivion in alcohol. Even so, Lee managed to quietly put together a stellar career in film and television. How did Lee Marvin succeed with the odds so stacked against him? He has an impressive lineage. On February 19, 1924, the world became a little more interesting with the birth of a child named Lee Marvin. Despite his rough and tough persona, Lee Marvin wasn't born in a boxcar as wolves howled in the night, but came into life the child of a comfortable middle-class bohemian New York couple. His mother, Courtney, a southern aristocrat, named him after his first cousin, 4 times removed, General Robert E. Lee. Courtney also boasted of having George Washington included in her family tree. She was very lady of the manor, though Lee's father, Lamont Marvin did not quite support them in that lifestyle. As a kid, he was expelled from a number of good schools for bad behaviour. A sign of his rebelliousness is the fact that when he joined the Marines, fought in World War II, was machine-gunned, shot by a sniper and won a fistful of medals, he was still discharged as a private because of his misbehaviour. "I'll never be buried in Arlington Cemetery," he told an interviewer, "but his Marine Corps are more understanding of misbehaviour, and that is in fact where he lies today." He'd be scarred by it for life. Back stateside working menial jobs, he fell into theatre by chance and found his calling. Soon enough he was in front of the camera, doing minor bits on film and in the emerging medium of television. From the stage he moved into television, and when he was sent to Hollywood for a part in a film, he decided to relocate. Marvin was always a character actor, crediting his hungry look, as if life had passed him by and he decided to get some back, as he explained. In 1953 he played the psychotic villain in Fritz Lang's classic noir The Big Heat, and as the crazy head of the motorcycle gang, the Beatles, opposite Marlon Brando's rival gang in The Wild One. He would face off against Spencer Tracy in Bad Day at Black Rock, and James Stewart and John Wayne in The Man Who Shot Liberty Valance, also getting his character's name in the title. At the same time, he was a regular presence on TV screens, guest starring in The Twilight Zone and The Virginian, as well as starring in his own cop show, M Squad. Lee reportedly received no offers for about a year after his M Squad run finished in 1960, causing a measure of panic and depression. He needn't have worried. 1962 would bring him back to stay, notably back in villain mode, playing the title character in John Ford's The Man Who Shot Liberty Valance. 3 years later he really got the chance to show his acting chops, playing two characters in an offbeat western comedy called Catbolou, a deadly gunslinger and a falling down drunk. Though the movie hasn't aged that well, Marvin is fabulous in both roles. Catbolou was a comedy western in which Lee Marvin plays both a drunk and a washed-up sheriff, and his metal-nosed assassin brother. With self-effacing humour, he thanked his co-starring horse, saying it deserved half of the award. He'd win the best Oscar for this, and give one of the more memorable acceptance speeches when he said, "I think half of this belongs to a horse somewhere out in the valley." Now Marvin had stepped out of the renter-baddie roles he'd been getting and became a film star in his own right. In 1966 he led Woody Strode, Robert Ryan and Burt Lancaster against Jack Palance in The Professionals. The next year he would again lead a desperate bunch of men in Robert Aldrich's classic war movie The Dirty Dozen. The film managed to be an old-fashioned war film and deeply subversive deconstruction at the same time, with Telly Savalas, John Cassavetes and Donald Sutherland starring alongside Charles Bronson and Marvin. The film's success gave him more control than he had before in his career, and he used it to make Point Blank with an upcoming English director, John Boorman. This neo-noir is a thumping, stomping Revenger's tragedy and features Lee Marvin at his height. Hell in the Pacific is even more startling, a two-hander starring Marvin and Toshiro Mifune about an American and a Japanese soldier marooned on an island who continued the Second World War alone until they have to seek some kind of truce. The two films forged a deep friendship between the actor and director, and Boorman would make a beautiful personal documentary on the actor. Boorman also told one of the best stories of Marvin in his cups. The actor and director were at a restaurant and Boorman didn't want the drunk Marvin to drive, so he stole his car keys and got in his car to drive it away. Marvin jumped on the roof of the car. Figuring that Marvin didn't live too far from the restaurant, Boorman decided to drive Marvin, who was still hanging on, home. He was stopped by a policeman who said, "Sir, do you know you have Lee Marvin on the roof of your vehicle?" The drinking and the disillusionment with the industry meant that some big roles passed him by. He turned down Pike in The Wild Bunch, having fallen out with Sam Peckinpah and Quentin Jaws. Worried that his reputation as a fisherman, he fished for marlin, would suffer. It wasn't uncommon for actors in the 1960s to take part in the spirits. However, many that knew Marvin understood the war also weighed heavy on him. This translated into some heavy drinking. Borman recalled another particular occurrence of Marvin's drunken behaviour. Borman claimed Marvin was so drunk one night he hailed a cab. However, the actor couldn't remember where he lived. When he couldn't spot the house, Marvin stopped a kid who was selling maps of the stars in the street. Buying one, Marvin showed the cabbie to his house. On arrival, the new homeowner answered the door and told Marvin that he'd sold him this house a few years ago. This is an amusing anecdote, but we must remember the heavy toll the war experiences had on Marvin. He was one of the most legendary Hollywood drinkers, but he always brought a tour de force to his pictures. Lee suffered from PTSD based on stories that were told to me and verified by other people. If you had a list of 10 classic PTSD symptoms, Lee probably had 8 or 9. The prominent ones were survivor's guilt, screaming nightmares, an ongoing need for violence, and worst of all, alcoholism. Lee Marvin is the epitome of tough guy. He is the actor who smiles rarely and behaves in a manner that the rest of the film-watching public can associate with the concept of masculinity based on his lack of emotionality or highly controlled feelings. These characteristics are those that society has deemed endemic to the real man identity. They are also a part and parcel to Lee Marvin's performer image and are the underlying themes behind much of his work. As lacking in feeling or unsentimental as many of Marvin's characters may appear to be, they are, in actuality, quite the opposite. The acting resume of Lee Marvin reads like the life of a hermit crab. Each time he changes roles, he changes shells at the same time. Like these crustaceans with the tender underbelly, Marvin's tough guy characters have a tendency towards the hyper-masculine and the overtly violent, creating a space around themselves that is, like the hermit crab's solid casing, visible and protective, and meant to shield the vulnerable inner form. That said, it is entirely possible that the films and icons that we have been accepting as the most masculine, due to their primary characters showing a complete lack of emotion and a heightened ability to kick everyone's ass, are actually the ones to highlight how false this notion really is. If this were the case, Lee Marvin would be one of the best examples. Lee Marvin, tough character actor turned unlikely and equally tough movie star, has been gone over 30 years now, abetted by some very intense experiences and a stated fondness for tequila in quantity. I look at the new action movies coming out and wonder, where's our new Lee Marvin? The manly man, the bad guy turned good guy, the guy who's so ugly he's almost beautiful, the man you wouldn't mess with, the guy who takes no prisoners. With precious few examples, all I see is a lot of boys in Hollywood these days, both real and aging. Marvin himself always admired Spencer Tracy and Humphrey Bogart, neither of whom could be mistaken for juveniles. He worked with Tracy and must have recognised the parallels that existed between Bogey and himself. They were both born into privilege, both got kicked out of most every school that would have them for incorrigibility, both ended up in the military and served in a world war, and both fell into acting because there were few other options open to them. Lucky for them and us that both were so talented. The parallels between Lee and Bogart extend even further. They both made their name initially playing bad guys and achieved unlikely stardom at around 40, and each would die too young, Bogey at 57 and Marvin at 63, before their stardom had begun to wane. He'd keep working right up to a sudden and fatal heart attack in 1983. It was just how he'd have wanted to go, as the following quote demonstrates. "Jesus, give me my span of years and knock me down when it's all over. You've got to make room for the other guy. I know that when my ashes are blown away or they stuff me in a sewer, it's not going to hurt. I've had the simple pleasure of being present when the sun was shining and the rain was falling. I've had mine, and nobody can take it away from me." Well said, Lee, and well done. If you liked this video, don't forget to give it a thumbs up, subscribe if you're new here, and if you want to support my work, please visit my Patreon page. Lee Marvin is responsible for some of Hollywood's most famous tough guy characters. The man oozed cool vibes and it showed on screen. Like him, Jack Palance was such a character. Do you want to know why Jack Palance knocked out Marlon Brando? Watch this video.